On mute and then mute it again.
Meaning you. No. After, I mean, before the election of the. Oh. So you back to one hundred. No, I don't want to leave. The four children, right?
No. Still can't, she cannot hear you. Is the sound up on the computer there? On that computer here in Emeritus, that's at the bottom?
Yeah, otherwise it's going to be an echo because the microphone is here in the camera.
It's very soft.
So maybe it is, so nobody can hear us in the participants.
I said it's very soft. Your voice is very soft.
Yeah. Maybe to raise the volume here.
She is fine. It's the highest.
Is it the highest? Yes.
Then she thinks that ready for me.
It's not anywhere. It's not anywhere.
Actually, right. He's doing a great job. Technology is big. Yeah. It's great.
It's designed,
When it works, it works, you know.
it's on my age.
So it's getting the sixth grader even,
Oh, yeah.
or maybe even the second grader, probably getting better.
That's right. Grandson, they're going to sports scholarship. Gamer. So that's why they did learn.
That's a good read.
Well, they can contribute. She's a- Yeah, they're all good.
Look at here, we open gallery, but we cannot see the others.
Yeah, the bigger thing is the sound, you know, they can't hear us, so, yeah, okay.
Better. There you go.
All right, and they can't hear us, they can't hear us.
There's a problem with them because I can hear, I can hear it here, I can hear on my cell phone.
Yes,
Yes. Yes, yes.
there are no, can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
Oh, great.
Yes, yes,
I can hear you.
yes,
Oh, good, okay.
yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
20 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
I guess then I can move there. I could just disconnect myself. So that no problem.
Think we're all here, Ruben, are we ready? That's the memory we have to see screen, but we'll start with Sister Tricia. Calendar first. Yeah. From the seniors. Hey, welcome to everyone. First of all, I want to thank Betty for hosting us in this very nice meeting. And it's honest, did some housekeeping, rituals. The ladies' restroom is down the hall on the left. And the men's room is, once you turn left, all the way down to the end. But, welcome to everyone for joining us. It's the first time we've met. In quite a over, at least May last year. Like a year and a half.
That was a long time ago. They usually at the mother's room.
Very nice.
At the mother's room, they're doing some basic floor, new flooring. And it's very noisy outside the room. The room is okay, but outside the room is kind of noisy at sometimes. That's why. We prefer to hear it for business.
And we'll begin by putting together reflection of this part of the packet that you sent to us.
Yes, you can pass it on, please.
We need a room. There's one report. The printed packet. Print something. Everything you said. Here you get a duplicate. A duplicate then, I guess. Put together, let us pray for courage to open my eyes.
My eyes that I may see the needs of others. Open my ears that I may hear their
Open
cries.
my heart. So
Heart
that it
so
be
that
not
they
be
not
suffer.
suffer.
Let any not be
Let me not
afraid
be
to
afraid to
defend the weak
weak
because
because of the anger of the strong.
of
Not
the
afraid to defend the poor because of the anger of the show me where love and hope and faith are needed, and use me to bring them to those places. And so open my eyes and my ears, that I may this coming day be able to do some work of peace for me.
Now we'll have the introduction of the members. I'm gonna invite those who are watching from Zoom to begin. What you call? Okay, Irma. Irma, introduce yourself. Yeah, we lost your hand. Okay, Father Vader.
Yes,
Please introduce yourself, sir. Father Vader, could you introduce yourself, please?
pardon me?
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, no, I did not. I am, well, I'm not Father Fader. This is not Father Fader, but I stand in awe of the people around the table, and so I'm glad to be participating from this angle. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sister Sophia.
Well, I'm Sister Sophia, and I work with the Missionary Catechism of Divine Providence. And so I'm here to learn from all of you because all of you are just so wonderful with all the work that you do. And I love your newsletters and, all the little updates that you give us. They're always very informative. So I'm always learning. So glad to be here.
Sister Seal.
I'm Seal Rager with the Dominican Sisters of Houston, and I missed a few meetings, and I hope to stay for the duration today, but I might get interrupted. So if I leave quickly, just know that I was glad to be here for the short time.
Okay. Lydia.
Hi,
Yes.
everybody. Lydia Kuykendall, Mercy Investment Services. It is still really hard to hear you. Also, if I miss something, throw something at the screen. Um, Good to be with you all. Happy to help out any way I can.
And now Megan.
Megan had to step out. Megan and I are both in the same room. I'm Sister Irma Gonzalez with the Order of the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament, our regional house here in Corpus Christi. We've been members of SRIC for a long time, but we've been in and out and we do our best, but not always what we consider enough. So we keep coming to the meetings. Thank you. Like Sophia, we learn a lot from the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Susan, I'll begin with you if you would.
We want to see if we can rectify our volume in here. Yeah, because they're saying that they have difficulty hearing.
Oh, really?
Trying, he said that. Irma, can you hear us?
Now I can.
Okay, and Lydia, can you hear us?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Yeah,
Okay,
it is.
so I guess, ramp up our own volume when we're speaking would be the best solution.
I'm not sure where the microphone is, but if the person speaking, especially if they're going to give a report, could speak into it, that would help.
Yes, maybe to be closer because the microphone is in that bar.
Okay, we'll start with Susan to introduce around the table.
Okay, Sister Susan Mika with the Benedictine Sisters. And Veronica Cahill with Sisters of the Holy Spirit. Sister Ernestine Trujillo, the Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Yvonne Dillon, individual member. Anna Falkenberg, SRIC staff.
Larry Hufford, retired professor from Incarnate Word and St. Mary's University.
Sister Patricia Reagan with the Congregation of Divine Providence and Providence Trust.
Esther A, individual member.
Sister Mary Teresa Cullen, Bridgetine Sisters.
Sister Leticia Rodriguez, CCVI.
Nina Martinez, I work with Sisters of the Eagle with Ruben.
Closer. Okay, can everybody see me? Hi, my name is Ruben Lopez and I work with Sister Susan and Anna from SRIC.
And today we welcome Larry Hufford. And what I suggest is he starts speaking. And if it gets to a point where it's really difficult to hear him, if somebody could interrupt and we'll move him closer to the microphone.
Can you hear me well, or should I move closer?
Raise your hand if you could hear him.
You can hear me well? Okay, good.
Oh, great.
I'll try to raise my voice a little. Anyway, I've been a professor of political science, international relations for 50 years, 20 years at Incarnate Word and 30 years at St. Mary's University. So I surrounded myself with nuns and brothers and love Catholic intellectual tradition and Catholic social teaching. And so if I count the years I've been in grad school, so about 54 years, I studied, researched, and taught democracy, democratic theory, how you create democracies, strengthen democracies, what it takes as institutions to support democracies, and how quickly all that can go away. I always felt a little uneasy when Richard Nixon was elected in 68, 72. I was a little uneasy, maybe a little more uneasy when Reagan was elected. I didn't have any real uneasy feelings when H.W. Bush was elected. I was sad when George W. won, beat Al Gore. But this past election hit me like a political tsunami. Hit my spouse as well. She woke up in the morning and was in tears. I woke up and it just, depression hit me. And I thought, you know, if 55 years studied, researched, and taught democracy, and here it goes. And I spent about 3 days not talking to anyone other than my spouse, and we didn't talk a lot. And then I said, what did I do the last semester I taught? I went to my departmental chairs, wonderful, wonderful supportive woman, and Dr. Betsy Smith. And I said, okay, Betsy, here are the courses I'm going to teach my last semester. I don't know where they fit, but it doesn't make any difference to me because this is my last semester. And here's what I'm going to teach. She said, fine with me. One was global nonviolent civil resistance movements. And the other was a course I designed, which was called Politics of Hope. I said, I have to leave students with hope. So I thought about that, and I said, in those 3 days of kind of silence and meditation, Larry, you have to find hope. And you have to try to spread it as much as possible. But you certainly have to live it. Otherwise, all these former students that are calling, asking what they should do as middle school teachers, high school teachers, college profs, then it's not sincere. So I went back to one of the sources of hope, a lot of them, you know, around 68, I started reading Thomas Merton and been a fan of Thomas Merton's ever since. But Václav Havel was a person that I had tremendous respect for, now deceased, but he was imprisoned in Czechoslovakia. He's a playwright, imprisoned in Czechoslovakia for writing an anti-communist play about a rock band that had been imprisoned for singing protest music in Czechoslovakia. And he spent 4 years in prison. And his book talks about going through periods of depression and then, you know, finding ways to come out of it. Letters that he wrote to his spouse every day he was in prison. And he wrote on hope. And then he later, when the wall fell, he became president of Czechoslovakia. And when it split into 2 countries, he said, not one life should be lost. Although I feel terrible about the split, but not one life should be lost. Slovakia can be its own country. Czech Republic can be its own country. But he starts out, hope is a gift. You don't have the power to surrender. So that hit me. I don't have the power to surrender hope. I can't let an election cause me to lose hope. And he says, hope in this deep and powerful sense is not the same as joy that things are going well, or willingness to invest in enterprises that are obviously headed for early success. But rather, hope is an ability to work for something because it is good, not just because it stands a chance to succeed. Hope is not the same as optimism. It's not the conviction that something will turn out well. but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. And that just very powerful words. At any rate, also, people who are seeing society only from above tend to be impatient. We want to see justice now. Well, when I went to Central America during the 80s, the early 90s, but when the Jesuit community was assassinated, Father John Sobrino was not home. And when he went back to the empty space that was his community, and his housekeeper and her daughter, Father Sobrino said, I will continue the work. That summer, I had a group of students. We were meeting with him at the university. And I said, Father Sobrino, how do you maintain your hope? And he said, that's an interesting question that I don't understand why it is asked by a Christian. Shouldn't you always have hope? I cannot lose hope. What I have understood is that I am not going to be alive when justice comes to El Salvador and the Salvadoran people. But it will come sometime. And I have to continue my work. And I have to continue in the spirit of my family, my Jesuit family, and the housekeeper and her daughter. So we can't stop. We absolutely cannot stop. So he says, don't want to see immediate results. Anything that does not produce immediate results can sometimes seem foolish. But we have to be motivated by the fact that in the long run, justice will prevail. Hope also matters to democracy. We have to have shared hope, find ways to have shared hope. SRIC and the work of ICCR is a way of finding shared hope. This board is a way of finding shared hope. And that has to continue. It ties this community of activists together. And hope is an action word. And we must realize that. And I hope everyone has had the time or will have the time to Google ICCR.org, the parent organization, because it has the document that was written on November 7th, reaffirming our commitments in light of the 2024 election. So all the board members should read that. It's a very important document. I didn't send you that, did I?
No.
I didn't send you that one.
But we will send you that.
Because it's really important.
We do follow up.
So when I look at the Economist magazine, which is a kind of mainstream conservative magazine, highly respected, they started an economic democracy index. They have 60 different criteria that they use to determine and break down countries into full democracies, flawed democracies, hybrid regimes, and authoritarian regimes. Now, we think of the United States, well, we're the democratic model for the country. We rank 29th on the Economist Democracy Index, 29th, and we are headed in the wrong direction. And so we are right in the middle of flawed democracies. And you look at how democratic are we? But we don't elect presidents on the popular vote, though President Trump would have actually won. We did that this time. We elect them through an undemocratic electoral college because the small states thought they would be left out, and the slave states thought that they would be left out. That would take a constitutional amendment to overturn. We have 435 members of the United States House of Representatives. 85% of those seats are in gerrymandered districts that it's almost impossible for the opposing party to win. The only way you get someone out of office is if they, in those districts, is if they retire or if they are beaten in the party's primary. So that's not a strong democracy. 85% of those seats, you know who's going to win on election day. The money that it takes to spend for the 7 states that kind of determine the electoral college vote in a close election. Certainly did in 2016, 2020. It did in Al Gore, Bush election. So we have those 7 states that, you know, are the only ones that basically that Harris and Trump campaigned in the last month. Elon Musk put $200 million into Pennsylvania in the last month. $200 million. The Ohio Senate race, which had a very progressive, labor-oriented senator, 2 terms, had been a U.S. rep before that, Senator Brown. And that race, how much money was spent by the Republican and Democratic candidates together? $441 million to elect a senator in the state of Ohio. $441 million. Majority of that, the Republican candidate, whose big issue is making money in cryptocurrency. And Elon Musk is a big Bitcoin guy, saying, well, I want to have people able to pay their taxes through Bitcoin. The Montana Senate race, where there was a Democratic incumbent, a farmer, rancher, born and bred in Montana, rancher all his life, and he was defeated. And Montana doesn't have a large population, but that race costs close to $300 million. The overwhelming majority spent trying to defeat Tester. The Texas Senate race between Cruz and Allred cost over $166 million. And, you know, the youth vote, I was talking to a political science prof at St. Mary's, and I said, well, how did people respond to the election? And he said, well, my senior level course on the presidency, we had a really good discussion. But the freshmen, it was, well, Trump won. Now they're 18 and 19 years old. So they were 14 and 15 in 2020 when Trump was trying to overthrow the election, overturn that election, asking his vice president to violate the Constitution. And then you had January 6th. That was all not part of their memory. Not part of their memory. And this is a class that's, you know, St. Mary's is 75% Latino, Latina, majority Latina. He did say in the honors class that the male students came in, some of them were wearing MAGA hats and so forth. What did that do to the females in class who were overwhelmingly for Harris? Intimidated them not to speak. So, you know, free speech. It's tough creating a classroom environment where people are going to share openly, honestly. Gerrymandering districts in states so that the state legislature is controlled. The worst gerrymandered states are Texas and Ohio. Wisconsin was, but the governor has now approved a new plan that might change that. But the districts for state rep and state senator are now gerrymandered to where they're for one party or the other. So you had in Texas, Trump sweeping the Texas border counties. He took 14 of 18 border counties, the Mexico-US border. He took 14 of 18 counties. He captured 55% of the Latino vote in Texas. He won 14 of the 18 counties within 20 miles of the border. There's an upside to that, as they say, oh, it's you know, this wave of movement towards Republicans. It was a wave of movement towards Trump and his message, which is not terribly positive. However, if you look at the four border counties of Texas and Mexico, where Trump won the presidency, sometimes by very large margins, and he switched Starr County, which is 97% Mexican American, 97%, first time since the 1890s that they voted Republican. But what happened in those four counties? Down ballot, the sheriff, county commissioners, and so forth, all Democrats won. So it wasn't a sweep for the Republican Party other than Jim Wells County, which is Alice, Texas, where the sheriff lost by a very, very narrow margin, the Democratic sheriff. But the Democrats did very well down ballot, which means people knew them personally. The voters knew them.
Went to the Hope guy.
Or felt they knew them personally. However, it is a clear message that the Democrats need to reevaluate how they campaign along the border. Okay. Now, some of the key ballot issues, when you look at all the states that Trump won, and he won all 7 of those key electoral states very narrowly, not by a large margin, not any of them. And Georgia was about 0.2% of 1% margin. So those are very, very close victories. But what about other measures on ballots around the country? Voters approved minimum wage increases to $15 per hour in Alaska and Missouri. Voters expanded ability to earn paid sick leave in 3 states, Alaska, Missouri, and Nebraska. Voters approved a state constitutional reproductive rights issue in 7 states: Arizona, Colorado, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, and New York. And Arizona, Missouri, Montana, Nevada all went Trump by fairly good margins. Yet the reproductive rights passed. Voters rejected school vouchers in Colorado, Kentucky, and Nebraska. And Alaska even opted to ban anti-union captive meetings, while Oregon voters to pass a measure protecting the rights of cannabis workers to unionize. So, you know, there were progressive movements throughout the country. So the idea that there's one election and to one person in that office of the presidency, incredibly important. However, it's not the whole story. There's still positive news. Now, the person who really frightens me is not Donald Trump, it's Elon Musk. He wants to overhaul government. He and his running buddy, who also ran for president, the Republican president, backed out very quickly. But they want to eliminate $2 trillion from a $6.5 trillion budget. You know, where's that going to come from? We'll talk about it. Musk says it's going to cause temporary hardship on the middle class and poor, obviously. He says we're going to have to live within our means. This is a man whose SpaceX program and Tesla get over $15 billion in government grants. Over $15 billion that he gets, and he calls that private enterprise. And he's not going to suffer a lot. So where does he want? Well, one is the Department of Education, which they really want to eliminate. They would break it apart, and a few of the programs would be sent off to other departments, but they really want to dismantle the Department of Education. Why? The agency indoctrinates children with left-wing propaganda. So we'll see about that. Now, most economists say they can't eliminate $2 trillion, but they can eliminate $200 to $400 million. Now, 60% of the budget, 60% of the budget is in the Departments of Defense, Veteran Affairs, and Homeland Security. Not gonna shut those down. So they want to shift a lot of the education department's workforce training. The Labor Department also wants to eliminate the FBI and relocate 15,000 FBI special agents to other agencies. And he wants to get rid of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, shifting its duties to other departments. Now, if $2 trillion is absurd, then payments to individuals, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are where the cuts would come. Now, among the biggest cuts would be Medicaid. You know that. Provides health coverage to lower income Americans. The CHIP program and what they can do with the Affordable Care Act. which covers about 100 million people in total. It is so embedded that it's going to be hard to just eliminate the Affordable Care Act, but they will do what they can to harm what is very essential for people being provided basic health care. Trump's administration is going to face some problems with an organization you may be familiar about, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA. It's set up to study the problem of voter fraud, but that it didn't pan out. So, but the law has strict transparency mandates requiring, among other things, advance notice of meetings, that meetings are publicly accessible, and that the public has a view into what records the commission is using to do its work. It also requires that the commission's members are not all of the same viewpoint. So what you're actually going to see, more oil and gas drillings, dissolving and restructuring the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's the National Weather Service. Trump has disliked that since it was predicting, hurricanes, tornadoes, and it also provides the data behind the weather apps on our iPhones. So, and then he wants to eliminate a raft of clean energy programs in the Department of Energy. Reverse longstanding EPA designation of carbon dioxide pollution as a threat to human health. And end states' ability under the Clean Air Act to adopt what California has, very rigorous standards for, among other things, tailpipe emissions. So then there are 6 climate and environment takeaways, and you have that article in your package, and I'll just go over them. 1, keep an eye on Project 2025. They want to roll back the Inflation Reduction Act. That's the main passage of the Biden-Harris administration. The Inflation Reduction Act. And it is a clean, it is a very good for the climate, clean energy. And so far, under that act, companies have announced $265 billion in clean energy projects and manufacturing facilities, created 330,000 jobs. And what you have in that IRA Act is 2/3 of the money and projects are in red states, mostly in the South. Now, to try to get rid of a lot of the IRA Act is going to meet resistance in the House of Representatives from those whose districts are benefiting tremendously.
Even though they didn't vote for it.
Even though they did not vote for him, which is
What percentage? Oh, you didn't vote for that act.
yeah, 2/3. So the silver lining in all this, you look at states like Washington, you look at states like California, and you look at states like Massachusetts. The biggest environmental win is in Washington State, where voters crushed by more than a 20-point spread an initiative concocted by a Seattle hedge funds bro that would have dismantled the state's strongest in the nation climate law. Voters in South Dakota going for Trump, rejected a measure that would have made it easier to permit a contentious CO2 pipeline. And in California, voters overwhelmingly approved a $10 billion bond measure that will help the state get ready for the impacts of climate change. Montana's constitution includes an explicit right to a clean and healthy environment. So there are positive things happening. And then you get to ESG, and investors say that the article I sent out, they remain optimistic despite the threat of Trump. Now, you're not going to see people using the word or the term ESG. You just find different terminology. You know, I remember in Nicaragua, in the heyday of liberation theology, that Nicaragua had, you know, Cardinal Bravo, yeah, Obandui Bravo. My expert here in Central America, I rely on. Thank you, Ivan. So we're out in the Jinotega, Nicaragua, and we're meeting with this pastor, and I was told he is one of the ones being considered to become an archbishop. And he told us all the projects he was and organized, was running in Jinotega, in that area. And afterwards I said, you know, Father, everything he talked about was straight out of liberation theology, but you never, ever mentioned it or any of the terminology. And he said, absolutely, our cardinal doesn't like it. So you don't use that terminology. Well, I think that's what SRIC and ICCR folks are going to be doing. You're going to be doing the same thing you've been doing, but you might use different language. And that language might be important to shareholders who are so important to your work. It's, you know, you're working on long-term problems associated with systemic risks, and you just have to look at the long term. But, you know, there are over 10 million people in America working in clean energy industry in some manner, in companies that are connected somehow with clean energy. And you know how many work in the oil and gas industry? 300,000. So as one of the investors of the hedge fund says, you know, it's the law of physics. And Donald Trump, more than anything, loves to make money. Well, clean energy is where people are making money these days. So again, you have to look at the positive and say, how are we going to work around this? And then there's sustainable finance, what the election means for sustainable finance. And here's where the article I gave you, what will the U.S. election mean for sustainable finance? Trump pledged to protect Americans from radical leftist ESG investments. So he's got to protect me from folks like you sitting around the table that are such a threat. Set the example for Republicans across the country to follow his lead in fighting EGS. So then you have Jim Jordan, who is the representative from Ohio that represents the district that all my family lives in Ohio. But the ESG project of 2025 will create a severe, long-lasting damage to our economy and environment. Many states boycott ESG fund companies, managers, sometimes they raise costs to themselves. You know that, you're aware of it. You're aware of the danger. So where are you, where are we? As members, that you people are doing in the trenches. You're in the trenches working. Can't stop. You gotta keep going in. You have to find areas of hope because the areas of hope are out there. We need to find them. We need to connect with them. We need to build local organizations, national organizations. A lot of very progressive events are happening in local areas. And you look at San Antonio with progressive mayor, progressive city council that we have. Hopefully we can keep. But there's progressive things happening in San Antonio. And if things look grim on the state level, work local. And the urban areas are where you can look at a map of Texas. Where did Trump lose? Dallas. Or not Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, and El Paso. That's where the progressive part is. But there's also a progressive element under, as I said, the border counties that didn't all go Republican. In fact, they maintained, so we've got to work, but find different ways to work, find different ways to reach those who are employed in the oil and gas industry. And some of Linda's spouse, her relatives working in the oil and gas industry. They're very pro-Trump. They're Mexican American. They're from Laredo. You find ways to have them move from working, making good money in oil and gas, move over to clean energy. So there's lots of reason to be optimistic, but optimism is not the same as hope. Hope is an action word. So you have to have hope.
You did not mention about the mass deportation. So.
Because I didn't mention that.
Could you hear the question? Mass deportation.
Yes.
Mass deportation.
We'll have a question and answer period.
Okay, just very quickly. One of the reasons that you had Valverde, counties along the border, some of them that went more for Trump. There was one period, and it happened under Biden. There was one county, almost 20,000 Haitians arrived pretty quickly. But they're coming into counties with a lot of poverty. And so, there's an issue there. The poor feel, I remember going on the border of Mexico and Guatemala, going to the United Nations refugee camp for Guatemala. And we visited that. It had been 11 years in existence, and it was closing down. And a peace accords had been signed in Guatemala, but it was closing down. So as we were walking out of that refugee camp, there were 3 women who were Mexican women residents of that area saying, we're poor and we don't have what they have in that refugee camp. Who cares about us? You probably don't. Why didn't you come see us? You came to see them. So, I think that, there are these kinds of issues on the border that have to be faced and dealt with. Of course, the Senate did pass that piece of legislation, which would have been the most progressive immigration bill, for 4 years. And Trump told Johnson, the Speaker of the House, do not bring it to the floor. Do not let it come to committee. That's our campaign issue. And boy, was it. So immigration is going to continue because the conditions are awful. And I don't have an easy answer to that. But I do know that Haitians are leaving Springfield, Ohio. And it's beginning to negatively impact the economy of Springfield, that had made a comeback because of the Haitians who moved there. But they're moving to cities like Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, trying to get lost because they fear that when the oath of office is taken, that they will be the first. So, it's a horrible situation. My daughter, who's adopted and has the dark brown skin, is Mexican American, born in San Antonio, and she lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. What is she going to do if deportation starts? She will start carrying her passport with her at all times to prove her citizenship. What kind of country is this? My brother-in-law Laredo says, I don't have any documents handy. I said, well, it might be a good time to find them. It's just, that's a really scary time. And the people he has appointed to lead that effort. So I don't have the answer to that.
Especially for the youth, most of the time, they only have a birth certificate.
Yeah.
Okay, it's controlled by parents. So sometimes in a way, if they call them, you have to go for a lot of procedure before you can get the money. This is one of the things I was really worried is that lots of people, especially in Texas, and also California too. And I know they have a detention they feel is because they make them rich. How much funding they can make the money to build a detention, and also all the supply, all the food and care, whatever, and security guys, they are the one that make the most money. I read the article yesterday about that. Why they do that is because the one of the Trump royalty already planned to have the detention, center there to host everybody there so they can make a lot of money. That's what they do.
You privatize it and then fund it with taxpayer money.
That's what they do. They already set it up.
Yeah.
We do.
And one of the things with regard to the Haitians and the Venezuelans and the Cubans, and I think there's another country that get the temporary status so they can work immediately when they come into the country. He says he's going to eliminate that immediately.
Are they likely to go after basis like enunciation? I was, Catholic Church, and like we had a meeting at a presentation ministry center last Wednesday, and the fear and tension was just
Oh, it's again, you'll go after all faith-based efforts that have been in existence for many years, doing great work. They're going after them. So,
Well, I was saying to our sisters this weekend that, I mean, I think we need to have a policy, clear policy, and have everybody trained. If somebody comes to the door, you know, if it's ICE or it's Border Patrol or whatever, you know, so that everyone knows what to do. So to me, that's clear. And then like in our portfolio, we had bought those two companies, the Geo Group and Core Civic, a long time ago, you know, before the pandemic and all of that, you know, to raise questions. And so they had gone down to close to maybe $5 to $7 per, you know, share. And now it's back up to $20 a share and $22 a share because they put out all of these press releases that they're ready. They want to, you know, they have the detention centers that have been closed or whatever, and they want to, you know, be part of it. So the irony, you know, and then also, you know, because of the anti-vaccine person that possibly would be going into the, you know, government, Moderna and Pfizer and Merck have gone down. And, you know, their stock prices have gone down because of this possibility. So you see the direct impact, even though the stock market is going up, that it's impacting certain sectors that feel like they will be impacted, you know, by whoever is in the government. So that, to me, that was clear.
Are there any questions from those of you who are on Zoom?
No.
To me, it's scary. So many of his alleged appointments, he's gonna surround himself with.
You know, in 1972, we came back from Europe, and it was August before I was going to get my job at Current Word. So I got a job as a social worker for a resettlement migrant program in my home county in Ohio. My home county in Ohio is voted 78% for Trump. It's 99% white. And still, but I got this job, and in the summer when migrants came through to pick tomatoes, there was a young man who said, you know, can you help me? He said, I want to give my wife legal status. Do you know how to do that? And I said, no. And I, you know, well, young and dumb, and didn't ask her, but I just called at that time the INS, you know, and said, what's the procedure? How do I do this? And it was on the phone a long time. Well, the next morning when I got to the office, there were these two guys right out of Central Casting, suits, ties, and sunglasses on, one on each side of the door. Right, and I walked in, and they said, we're from the INS. We need to talk to you. And we went in and sat down and said, you made a phone call yesterday about undocumented illegal being here. I want you to take us to her. And I said, you know, it took me a nanosecond to say, just lie. So I just lied. I said, you know, we got 5 different camps. I have no idea which camp they're in. And, you know, I didn't get his name. So I don't think I can help you there. They said, well, you better in the future, or you might be more in trouble. I said, well, no, I'm trying to think about that. But, you know, they were there immediately. So, friend of mine, former student, good friend now, got a job in Richmond, Indiana, at Quaker College in Brooklyn. And he grew up on the border, just south of El Paso, San Rosario, and George Nunez. And anyway, he said he got to know the resettled community of Mexican Americans and Mexicans. And he went to the paper and he said, you know, they own small businesses. They're all contributing to the economy of Richmond, Indiana. Why don't you do a story on them? So Joyce said, hey, Doug, I should have known better, shouldn't I? And I said, well, you're asking me, you know? And I said, well, you learn. The next day, buses came and they rounded up documented and citizens and took them to Indianapolis where they were going to sort them out. Just keep the ones who were undocumented. And George called me crying and he said, what have I done? What have I done? I said, I don't know, but you got to call the human rights lawyers at the University of Cincinnati Law School. Yvonne's had more stories and all of her stories. I just, wow, somebody comes to the door.
That's another interesting thing that I read in the article about now they force all the hospital. When you admit to the hospital, they want you to have a citizen status before they can treat you. Actually, it's false. Okay, I just want to let you know that the government being pushing them ask for the status before they were accepted, but that's not true. So a lot of people scared.
It goes out on social media.
Yeah, they're so scared, they back out, so just really, everybody knows about that.
For us here in San Antonio, SE Stands, one of the coalitions of the rights groups, is working diligently to make sure that hospital personnel understand that they must say that it's discretionary to give the information.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the other thing that we're adding to that is saying all of us white middle-class folks, when we're admitted to the hospital, we ought to be saying, are you going to ask me my immigration status? And please record that I refuse to answer.
Yeah.
Because that will screw up their data.
Yeah.
If the purpose of the data collection is for Abbott to be able to say how many undocumented persons are being treated, and then we decline to answer and they record that, it skews their data and it defeats the purpose. But also it points out to the personnel who were all caught. I mean, they're caught. They got to do their job.
That's right.
They're all caught in it, but it also conscientizes them to the fact that they are being forced to discriminate. They're forced to, because they're not gonna, especially like, all the nuns, they're not gonna ask you.
But it's not just only this, and even like myself, when I renewed my driving license about 3 years ago, I had to go for a document to prove I am United States citizen. I really just was shocked. I mean, you have a whole back of the document. You have to bring your passport. They said it's not valid. I said, what? You're not valid? For the passport? You have to think about it. Believe me or not. You don't have a passport. I could go all the way back to get my birth certificate, neutralization paper, and whatever. I mean, and I have my license for the last 30 years. And this is the first time I've had that. That was 3 years ago. Infections. So just want you to aware with that. So I have to tell everybody, just be ready. And you're a little bit different from anybody else, you better be good. So
It's been so difficult. One of their little things they're saying is like today, the group that we helped to found in Austin, every Texan, there's a portion of that is working on all of this stuff around the hospitals. They sent out a link to get things in English and in Spanish around this, that little cards that you can then use. So I'll send that to Anna if she doesn't get it, but they just sent it out today, that they're trying to educate all of us in Texas, you know, like how to do it. And then they made little cards in English and in Spanish with our congregations or with our churches and that type of thing to try to educate. So I'll make sure that we get that so that it's already done. So let's use it.
That's great.
Just my personal thanks, and we need to move on, and I think this could have gone 3 hours. But, we do need to move on. My personal thanks to you, Larry, for giving us hope. I mean, for emphasizing the need to hope, and then giving us, some really interesting and information about how we got to where we are now. So thank you personally. I think us being all really.
Cannot live without, you certainly cannot love without hope. Love without hope. So, but people say, oh, you, is it in Carnegie? I said, yeah, and you get hooked on boards like this or Merced, Texas. And I said, yeah, you go to the women religious, they're the risk takers, they're the prophetic ones, they're the ones who are walking the walk. So a lot of my energy comes from women religious. So thank you. I'll go down there.
Take a 5-minute break.
Great.